Today, I'll present you a 2005 crime thriller movie named Revolver. After being locked up for 7 years, a British gambler named Jake Green is finally released from prison. 2 years after his freedom, he and his brother Billy head to a significant local casino with the plan of reclaiming the money owed to them by the casino's owner, crime boss Dorothy Macha. Disregarding his bodyguard Paul's advice, Macha lets Jake join his private poker game. While going up, Jake hesitates about taking the elevator due to his claustrophobia. Despite his anxiety, he takes the elevator since they need to climb 20 floors. Jake deliberately loses his initial bet on a chip toss against another player at the table. This is part of his plan to deceive Macha and make him feel overconfident. Later, when he places the same bet with Macha, he wins. With their bags full of money, Billy and Jake rush to leave the casino. On their way out, they encounter Zach, who warns them of danger and offers assistance, giving Jake his card. This time, Jake decides to use the stairs, but before he descends a single step, he collapses upon revealing the card, which reads, "Take the elevator." While Jake is rushed to the hospital, Macha expresses his concerns to Paul. It's apparent that after 7 years in jail, Jake is seeking significant revenge, especially following the incident involving his sister-in-law. Macha orders Paul to hire the top hitman to eliminate Jake. At the hospital, Jake is informed that there's no immediate explanation for his blackout, so he's advised to go home and rest while awaiting blood test results. Billy goes to his place, and Jake is accompanied by bodyguards for protection. However, as soon as they arrive, the bodyguards are shot and Jake narrowly avoids being hit. He finds a card on the floor instructing him to pick it up, which saves him. Jake attempts to flee in his car, but the driver is also shot. Fortunately, Zach arrives just in time to rescue him. The hitman, Sorter, is baffled by his miss, as he's known for his accuracy. He speculates that someone must have tipped off Jake. In a conversation with Macha, he blames his failure on a bad feeling. Meanwhile, Zach takes Jake to meet his partner Avi, who somehow obtained Jake's medical file. The diagnosis is grim. Jake has a rare fatal blood disease and only has 3 days left to live. Avi and Zach propose a deal. They'll provide protection in exchange for Jake giving them his money and complying with their requests, including answering any questions. Despite the non-negotiable terms, Jake leaves without a word, convinced that they're attempting to deceive him. After receiving the same diagnosis from his private doctor, Jake realizes he has no choice. He withdraws money from the bank and returns to accept Avi and Zach's terms. While on a ride, Avi explains that they are loan sharks and it's Jake's money they'll be lending. After delivering money to their first client, Avi pressures Jake to reveal his history with Macha. It turns out Macha once had 3 foolish men working for him called the Three Eddies. When they lost their card player before a big game, they forced Jake to replace him by threatening Billy's family. During the game, insults led to a violent shootout. Amid the chaos, the money vanished and Jake's name got implicated, leading to police questioning. To protect his niece from threats, Jake refrained from implicating Macha, who orchestrated the games. Consequently, Jake served 7 years in prison. During his incarceration, the Eddies angered Macha, resulting in their demise. After seeing a bunch of clients, Zach instructs Jake to stay at a motel. Meanwhile, Macha and Paul meet with the notorious crime leader Sam Gold, who is seen as the ultimate role model by other crime bosses. However, Gold doesn't entertain visitors, so they talk to his advisor, Lily Walker, instead. Lily agrees to facilitate a drug deal with Macha, while reminding him of Gold's aversion to attention and his lack of willingness to give second chances. At a later time, Jake gives more money to Zach and Avi, and they engage in a conversation about Jake's time in jail while playing chess. Jake had been given a choice between 14 years of regular prison time or 7 years in solitary confinement. He opted for solitary and shared a cell neighboring 2 inmates, a chess master and a conman. Despite not talking to each other, they exchanged information by leaving messages in library books. This is how Jake learned their strategy to win any game. These 2 inmates planned an escape and promised to take Jake, but they vanished without a trace, leaving him with a note about getting smarter by facing a clever opponent. Upon release, Jake realized they had taken his money, prompting him to employ their strategy to win big at casinos. As time goes on, Jake continues his work, meeting clients, and generously giving away his earnings. warnings. Although he's supposed to intimidate clients into paying, he can't bring himself to harm vulnerable individuals. Meanwhile, Avi and Zach prepare to break into a safe by attaching a truck to a wall and pulling it down. The safe contains the promised drugs, which Matcha intended to receive from Lily. Upon discovering the theft, Matcha sends Paul to resolve the situation. Paul reaches out to their rival, Lord John, who agrees to provide the drugs but at an inflated cost. The exchange is set up in a hotel room, where Jake, Zach, Avi, and their team use sleeping gas to incapacitate Matcha's and John's men. They take the drugs and money, framing Matcha and John for each other's robbery. Later on, Billy informs Jake that Zach and Avi are extremely dangerous individuals, even more so than Gold, urging Jake to distance himself. However, Jake ignores the warning and gets involved again. Jake's involvement in various matters draws suspicion, leading Matcha to order his execution. When Jake realizes this, he narrowly escapes a confrontation with Matcha's thugs. He confers with Avi and Zach, who confess they were aware that Jake hadn't been truthful about his dealings with the Eddies. These three individuals had planned to kill Jake after his release from prison due to his actions costing them their jobs with Matcha. To save his life, Jake struck a deal with them to provide a percentage of the money he borrowed each month. The situation escalated as they borrowed from Matcha and his interest was piqued by their enigmatic money source. Amid Jake's success with the strategy, he took a vacation, during which Matcha eliminated the Eddies for failing to repay him. Speaking of Matcha, he's having dinner at a fancy restaurant when his henchmen pay him a visit. They inform him that Jake has managed to escape. During this time, Sorter recognizes John's lover who is pretending to be a waitress. In response, Sorter shoots her before leaving the restaurant to pursue her driver. However, his aim is still off, and he only manages to injure her instead of killing her. Despite her injuries, the woman retaliates and shoots off one of Matcha's fingers amidst the chaos before dying. Then, Sorter is given the task of going to Lord John's hideout to eliminate him and his crew. Meanwhile, Jake is engaged in conversation with Zach and Avi as they play golf on a rooftop. They explain to Jake that Gold isn't a real person but rather a representation of ego and greed. Gold's power is derived from those who invest in him. The key for Jake is to change the rules of what controls him. Following this, Jake withdraws his remaining money from the bank and donates it all before sneaking into Matcha's bedroom. Engaging in an inner struggle against the voices representing his ego, Jake apologizes to Matcha, admits tricking him out of his money, and acknowledges him as the superior crime lord. He even reveals making a donation in Matcha's name before leaving. To confront his fears, Jake takes the elevator, which gets stuck on the 13th floor. Overcoming a panic attack, he has a mental conversation where he rejects his ego, ultimately freeing himself from the game. Once the elevator starts working again, Jake reaches the ground floor and finds Matcha waiting with a gun. However, Jake is at peace with himself and simply walks past Matcha, which drives Matcha to madness since he can't fathom someone not fearing him. Matcha's subsequent humiliation becomes evident as he realizes he's been thoroughly defeated. The following morning, Paul delivers newspapers to Matcha, showcasing his name all over them due to the donation made in his name. Matcha revels in this recognition, but his joy is short-lived as Paul informs him that Jake has the powder and has been deceiving them all along. Paul, Sorter, and Matcha's henchmen visit Billy, who manages to hide his daughter despite a betrayal from one of his bodyguards. The men resort to violence to extract information from Billy about Jake and the powder. As the torture intensifies, Sorter's discomfort grows. Refusing to harm a child, Sorter rejects his ego and systematically eliminates his fellow henchmen, though he makes a fatal mistake at the end and is killed as well. Meanwhile, Lily visits Matcha, bearing a wreath sent by Gold. Gold isn't pleased with Matcha's newspaper publicity, disliking the attention. Lily informs Matcha that his time is up and he won't get another chance, sending him into a panic. Avi and Zach take Jake and the powder to Matcha's casino, where Avi defeats Jake in a game of chess while revealing more details of the story. Avi and Zach had been adjacent prisoners to Jake, existing as figments of his imagination. Before Jake can fully grasp this revelation, casino bodyguards arrive to escort him to Matcha, who has the girl with him. Jake drops the powder bags and reassures his niece. Despite having a gun pointed at the child, Jake's lack of fear drives Matcha to desperation. The ego voices in Matcha's mind lead him to the belief that Jake can't harm a dead man, prompting Matcha to turn the gun on himself and pull the trigger.